Hi, I'm here today with Rishad Tobaccowala, who is a legendary advertising and media executive, and now he is also author of Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data. And I must say that I read the book, and thank you for my early copy, Rishad. So many important lessons for not only when you wrote it, but for today and for tomorrow. We at DPAA pride ourselves in the human connectivity and on the value of that, and that has been seemingly a good thread throughout your book. And man, do we need empathy and EQ today as well. First, tell me, how are you faring, and how are things going in your life these days?
Well, thank you for inviting me. And so far, everything is fine, which is I'm healthy, wife healthy, kids healthy. And nobody close that I know of has, got this or died of it. So that's so far so good. Otherwise, it's from my perspective of I sort of moved from being a full-time employee of Publicis to being an advisor. So I'm very busy helping with clients, etc., but not having to do the really hard work, which is how do we manage our costs and everything else, which is what a lot of my colleagues are grappling with. I'm just providing guidance, but I don't have to make the hard calls, so I'm sort of empathizing with them. And then two things that have turned out to be relatively positive, if this can be anything positive drawn from this, is, as you've seen by my book, because my book is really 12 books in one, which each chapter being its own book, 6 of them are optimized for COVID-19. So a lot of people said, did you know this was coming? Because there are chapters on how do you lead in difficult times. There's a chapter on how do you manage distributed workforces. And I said, no, this is just a big part of what I was anticipating would happen in the world regardless. And there's a lot of people have said this is like the great acceleration, which is this is going to force some things to be faster. So in that way, the book continues to resonate, and because it's very human and talks about also the importance of human connection, which we all now miss. And where I say if you need to have a human connection, do it visually, as we are tending to in Zoom. So that is good. And then as you have had me, I've been fortunate to speak at your conference, because I speak without multimedia or without notes or without slides. I'm a very Zoomable and Skypeable speaker. So I'm doing a lot, I'm doing 5 speaking events this week alone. And oddly, in the old days, I would have to travel, but now I can do multiple places on the same day sometimes. So that way it's good, but I would much rather have not had any of this happen, and I would much rather we get back to some form of normalcy.
By the way, what's great about your book as well, for anybody watching this and reading the book, is that you can jump in and out of chapters. You don't have to start at the beginning and flow through to the end. You could actually, if you want to kind of brush up on, changing workforce, you could jump into that area. If you want to brush up on, the EQ element of it, you could jump into that. And it's really a great tool for reading from front to back, but also for jumping in and out of as you need a little Rishad guidance in your life.
In fact, a lot of people are sort of doing that, and many of them are saying, hey, look, we're going back to certain chapters because they seem to be particularly sort of relevant at these times. It has worked, and oddly, there's such a demand for it, but at the same stage, there is a delivery problem that my publisher and I are having, which is when people, obviously it was selling through stores and Amazon and everything else, but a lot of people were basically buying it for their teams. So, right. People would buy 20, 50, 100, 200 at a time. And what used to happen is we could just ship it. So HarperCollins would just drop ship it to a central place. And whenever we wanted a large amount, we could do that. Or some people could say, let's order it from Amazon. Now, if you want the physical copy, you can't get it from Amazon for 2 weeks now. You can get the Audible copy, you can get the Kindle, but you can't get a physical copy. And HarperCollins can't drop ship it because there is no central location. So I'm speaking to 200 people, and the head of the company said, I want all the 200 people to get the book. So what we've now done is we've actually created a new way for 200 people to get a book without drop shipping, without Amazon, and without it being a Kindle or Audible. So there's actually a service called Glose, Glose. So what we now have is we've set up a mass thing that way. So this particular company, all 200 employees get an email with a code, and they basically get the book, and the book is in the cloud, but it's not Kindle. You don't need a Kindle. It's not Audible. It's a book which can basically be accessed anytime you want from any device you want. So you basically you use it if you want from a phone, from a laptop, from a desktop, from an iPad continuously, and it keeps your place. And so now we can electronically deliver a reading experience, right?
To any device, anywhere.
To any device, anywhere. And it's kind of this new way that we've started to do things.
Rishad, you've held many very senior positions over your career at Publicis on a national and global level. What are some of your observations of where and how media has changed, and then how it's changing today and how it may change when we come out of this?
So broadly, what has tended to basically happen is over the last 10 to 15 years, media has moved from being much more about segmented mass to reaggregated scale. So what I mean by segmented mass is we would take television and find the right cable show or the right television show to get to millions of people, or we'd find the right magazines, and many magazines would have subscriptions in the millions, or at least readership in the millions, and you'd say, okay, I want to get homeowner people, so I'll do some Sunset, and I'll do some Southern Living and some Better Homes and Gardens, and I'll try to do shows on E and whatever it was. But now, because we are increasingly utilizing media one at a time, even when we're doing a lot of media online, whether even it's on TV, we sort of watch, even if it's ad supported, we stream when we want. But at the same time, marketers are not particularly interested in reaching 2 or 3 people. So how do you reaggregate scale? And so obviously search was one form of reaggregating scale. Wired out of home is another way of reaggregating scale. So we've gone from basically segmented mass segmentation, or segmenting mass, to reaggregating scale. So in the old way, we basically took a cow and we hacked at it till we got a steak. In the new way, we take pieces of mince and we put them together till we get a good hamburger, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a different way. And so that's one. Second is electronic media has hurt some industries and has helped some industries. So what has tended to basically happen is the advent of technology has tended to hurt all traditional media with the exception of out of home, which is kind of odd, okay? So it's obviously hurt newspapers very badly. It's hurt magazines very badly. It's somewhat impacted radio, and it's starting to hurt television. But because digital media and advanced technology has basically let a billboard become a screen, and the price of the screen has become less and less, and the quality of the imaging has become more and more. And at the same time, because of mobility, you can send different messages to the screen at different times. So oddly, technology has helped out of home while has hurt all the other traditional media to a great extent, which is pretty sort of extraordinary, which sets at least your world in a good place once people are allowed to leave home again.
Exactly, which we're all looking forward to on so many levels. You speak a lot about innovation and data, Rishad, in your book and on your tours around. How has that changed advertising, and kind of what's the result on creative, and what also is the effect on the human equations input into gaining insights from the data, and who leads, the human or the data? And maybe you could speak to that a little bit. So
the concept underlying of my book is that in order to be successful as a human being, as a business, as a marketer, you have to combine the spreadsheet and the story. And if you move too much towards one or the other, you lose the plot. So to a great extent, and as I state in the book, I have an advanced degree in mathematics. I have an MBA in finance. And most people think I know a little bit about data, right? So what I'm about to say is not an anti-data screed. I truly believe you use data as a key ingredient. However, I do also at the same stage believe the following. Any marketer who only depends on data should leave marketing immediately, right? Because marketing and branding at its heart is recognizing that people choose with their hearts and they use numbers to justify what they just did. And if that was not true, then why should a marketer have an expensive car or expensive clothes? It should just be utility. You shouldn't drive anything but a Toyota Camry. You should have a Swatch or no watch at all, right? Why do people behave completely differently than the way they claim people make decisions? So that's one. People choose with their hearts, and they use numbers to justify what they just did, which is one. The second is, while data is an essential component, if you only depend on data, you actually then have no reason for having a job, because I can read the number and a machine can read the number and make a decision. So when someone says they make only data-driven decisions, I said, you've lost your job. Outside of that, you shouldn't be in marketing. You've also lost your job because AI can do it much better. And for companies, with the exception of there are very few companies who will actually separate themselves on data. Okay, I believe data is as important as electricity, which is businesses have to have it in order to survive. But data is also like electricity, which is almost no company in America talks about how they're a better company because of the way they use electricity.
Right, exactly.
And that's what most marketers have forgotten, because they were behind the curve on data. They've now said it's all data, data, data. And my stuff is, if you worship data, you will lose your job. You shouldn't be a marketer, and it's not a point of differentiation. And I believe human and storytelling and a lot of that is the differentiation, but working with data, not instead of or without it.
What's the story of when and how we come out of all this from a marketing perspective, from a media and advertising perspective? Certainly the most challenging times we've been through in more ways than even 9/11. What you're thinking about getting out of all this, and how and when?
So one of the key thoughts that I've had basically is we will get out of this, and we will get out of it gradually. But because unlike almost every other crisis I've lived through, which is in the last 40 years, I've basically seen the 9/11 and the recession and the dot-com bust, etc. This one is very different than all of those. I often say it's like you take all of them, you marry them all together, and then you extrapolate to the power of 10. And here's why it's different. First, it's a human crisis. Second is it's happening all around the world to everybody. And third, it's happening to every single industry. So almost everything else was basically either happening to a country, a particular economy, a particular stuff, and it wasn't happening all at the same time to everybody all the time. That's one. And as a result, it's very hard to project outside of a few things. One, because most of us are going to be 60 to 90 days either doing new things or not doing things we're used to doing. We are going to, in many cases, either do more of what we miss or ask why we did what we did. And there'll be some combination of that. So I would anticipate that it's likely that, at least for a long time, certain behaviors will stay, and those behaviors will be make me feel safe, make sure that it helps me with my economic security, and what are the implications to society. And therefore, as marketers, I would basically say, make sure that you have those messages, which is, why is it safe to use my products or services, right? How is this helping your security, either providing you with greater skills or value or something, economic security? And the third is, how is this helping society? Because I think people are going to become now focused And a long time basically ago said it's time to optimize for the citizen and not for the consumer. I think we're now going to be basically thinking about that. So I think as companies, we need to think about that. As leaders, and many of the people listening and watching to this are leaders, for them, I would basically point to these 5 characteristics, which is the 5 characteristics of leaders, which I stated in that last chapter of my book, which is Leading with Soul, is you need to do the following, which is A, you need to show that you are capable. And I think most leaders are, but this is the time which you have to step up and show you're capable. Integrity and trust matters, which is, do they believe you? Are you using facts? This is where data actually matters. You can't like imagine a story that has got nothing to do with science. So data matters. So integrity matters. Empathy, which is, are you thinking about someone else? Vulnerability, the fact that none of us really know what the hell's going on and we make our own mistakes. And the 5th is inspiration, which is that the future can get better and here's how it's going to get better. So those 5 characteristics of capability, empathy, integrity, vulnerability, and inspiration are the other things that I would say not only do leaders think about, but think about whether you have those in the tone of voice of your messaging.
Great message for marketers, for brands, and probably for politicians, leaders, or wannabe leaders. You're talking about the brands, marketers. What would you give as advice and guidance to media owners today?
So I would say that, from a media owner's perspective, there's an internal, an external, and a meta thing to think about. Internal, what's going to be very, very important is all the decisions you currently make, and many of the decisions that people are going to unfortunately have to make are very hard decisions. Who to furlough, what to cut, who not to hire, what freezes to put in, which are sort of the realities that we have to sort of deal with. It's going to be very important that you do that with a lot of empathy and a lot of humanity, that you explain why you're doing what you're doing, because this is like an asteroid has hit you. It's an asteroid has hit you. So how do you deal with that asteroid having hit you? Does that make sense? And so you have to speak internally, because it's not just the people who you lose, right, and how you treat them, but it's the people who stay. A big part of what this whole chapter in my book is, whenever change happens, the way you manage change is not for just the people who are leaving, but the people who stay. So that's one, which is very important. Then from the external perspective, which is your business model, I really believe that everyone should basically think about this is, you're starting with a fresh sheet of paper. How would you design your company now? And literally Bob Iger, who is coming back and he didn't leave, but he was this executive chairman who's now playing again his CEO type of role because of the emergency. And he's basically rethinking every part of Disney.
Right.
And that's a relatively successful company which has well funded. He's rethinking it. So I would say as a media owner, rethink. So all the stuff that you claimed that got in the way, and usually it's people and culture and heritage. The people are still there, but the culture and heritage are less of a problem now, I think, right? And there are fewer people, and people will understand that they have to be working differently. So one is, use this to reinvent your company. So I call this the great reinvention. Use it to reinvent your company, your products and services, the way you deal with people, the way you sell. You have to reinvent. Is a key thing with the media owners that I would basically say. Do not believe, for instance, like it's going to be, like if I were a magazine company, I would sort of assume that whatever I was showing as a decline in print sales, right, that just got accelerated by 50% to 100%, okay? And if you're out of home, the good news is that the technology is helping, which is fantastic. The disadvantage is obviously in the current time there is a problem, and then for a little bit of time people might not be as outside as they want to be, or in large gatherings. So
that makes perfect sense. You've written a lot lately, Rishad, on different elements of fragility. Would you like to just take us through a few of those?
Sure. So to me, what this particular challenge has done is it's basically showed that we as humans are fragile because we can get sick, which is interestingly. As a society, we're fragile because we have, I'll give you a number. In Chicago, 30% of the people in Chicago are African American, 75% of the deaths because of this have been African American. Okay, so, and it's this 2-to-1 is pretty much across the United States. So we're fragile as a society there. We're fragile in the fact that 15% of our country is immigrants. Right now, 30% of the people who are frontline workers are immigrants. Okay, so at some particular stage, there's a society fragility, there's a human fragility, and there's obviously a financial fragility, which is 50% of people could not basically go 2 weeks without a paycheck. And so you basically have a society that you're beginning to see where people are saying, oh, wait a second, we're fragile economically, we're fragile as a society, and I'm fragile as a human being. So I think in our mind, we have this fragility that is happening. And coming out of it, I think what we're all going to be looking for are, and this is what I would tell marketers to think about, is that we're going to look for safety. Mm-hmm. We're going to basically look for some form of security. Mm-hmm. And we're going to basically look what are the implications in society, right? Both from a human perspective, keep that in mind. From a leader perspective, keep in mind. From a company perspective, keep in mind, because that's much more real. So, think that, because in effect, and that's again why I think emotion will matter over data, because in effect, if you only make data-driven decisions at this difficult time, it's the fastest way to run your company out of business.
Right. Well, we certainly agree. I mean, we've built at DPAA a global connective tissue by really understanding the stories that need to be told, the human, included, of course, the digital nature of it. You spoke also about preserving optionality, which sounds like we really need to focus on coming out of that. That creates innovation. It sets the opportunity for change and seeking that change.
What I mean by preserving optionality is, when you think about it, every company is going to say, how do we keep secure, right? So where can they replace costs? Where can they basically be flexible? Where can they basically, if you're a producer, a production company, you're going to say, I need options besides a China supply chain. Yes, I'm going to have a supply chain in China, but I need optionality, right? If you are a company, you're going to basically say, how many workers do I need full-time and how many workers do I need part-time? I need some flexibility in my business. I need some flexibility in my finances, which is one of the reasons why people even don't need it. They're raising some money, which is I need to have. So it's preserving optionality is that. From a human perspective, it's like, can I depend on one job all the time? Should I actually learn new skill sets, right? I would like to work for a traditional company now because it seems to be more safe, but those jobs everybody might want to have those jobs and maybe they may not pay that well. What else can I do, right? So this whole idea of, so we are living in a world where people are basically have been polarized into, are you a CNN person, a Fox person? Is it a 0 or 1? And I think what's going to happen is it's both, right? And the future is going to be about mongrels versus purebreds.
That would be great. I think you portray a great direction for society, and hopefully we will get there. You've given a lot of great advice for marketers, for leaders, for media owners, as you do in your everyday life. What's your inspiration? What inspires Rishad, sitting in Chicago inside your apartment there? What kind of gets you going these days?
So, to me, obviously, I'm fortunate, and every day, first thing is I get up recognizing how fortunate I am, which is that right now my family and me are healthy, which is number one. Number two is we all like each other, which is also kind of important. But the third is I am not worried about the next economic thing for me, right? So what basically happens is I'm in unusual, which is about 75 to 80% of people have to be worried about economics or about having to make some really hard decisions at work, etc., which is because I've now become an advisor, I don't have to do that. So in effect, what I can then do, therefore, and what gets me sort of excited is helping people. And so that's a lot of what I'm doing is literally about 20 times a week, I speak to people, helping them. I do 6 or 7 talks a week. So I'm now going into lots of companies. I'm doing like webinars and all kinds of stuff. And people say, you're doing this and you're doing it for free. I said, yeah, I don't care. Like, I can help people, right? So it's a key thing. I said, what do you want me to do? Just help. So one is I'm helping people, which makes me feel good, because helping people makes me feel happy. That's one. But the second is I'm also using this to sort of improve myself, because, you know, to me, it's like helping people and then improving myself are the 2 key things. And in part of it is, it's really strange, which is like, for instance, I discovered that I could keep running even though all the health clubs were closed, because I live in a building and I realized that the parking lot, there's nobody going up and down. So I've got a 7th floor parking lot, which has now become my running track, which is, I'm sort of like, just like I'm inventing new things. But the other one is, as you probably know, the thing that I love drinking is draft beer.
That's right.
But there's no draft beer to be had. So I stopped drinking. And so, so it's one of those interesting things. And I keep running. So I'm like getting into better
great shape.
Right? The other is I love reading and I love watching movies. And so now what I do is every day I watch a classic movie. I have this channel called Criterion Channel. And every day I read for 2 hours. And so in effect, what's basically happening is I'm saying this is a very nice life, which is the way to look at it. But again, I'm very, very fortunate. I'm keeping touch with that it'll stay that way.
And it's wonderful to hear that you're taking your smarts and experience and view and helping people. And that's, you know, we need more people like you, Rishad. This has been great. In terms of kind of my 3 takeaways, what I would say is guidance for everybody is, and there's a lot of takeaways, but I'm just kind of trying to scintillate it down here. Be Zoomable and Skypeable. And that sounds important today and very much for tomorrow. Also, which, you know, is in your book and we've talked about over the years, is, you know, combine the spreadsheet and the story. Combine the spreadsheet as well as the story. We need to have both. And then what we like, of course, too, is, you know, digital has basically hurt all businesses but out of home. And in fact, digital has greatly enhanced out of home, which is very exciting. So Rishad, we all look forward to Independence Day, or as you say, Dependence Day. Yes. It's a joy and a pleasure, and thank you as always.
Absolutely. Thank you again for inviting me.